I'm good. I'm rolling.
Keep rolling.
Oh shit. What's
All
up?
right. So, Simon and Garfunkel, some of the early stuff this week.
Yeah. The folk duo from Queens.
Yeah, New York, staple. Paul Simon, most definitely. I don't know if Garfunkel is from New York City as well, but
Yeah, he is.
so yeah, New York, America. You know what's funny about the folk scene in New York? Because when you like with the music and the general vibe, you wouldn't think of it. I would think more Midwest or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's funny how it's like in the most like hipster, like high class,
It's ironically
like
in
area
the biggest city.
of like the world.
Yeah, but it's like this Americana folk style. Some people say that Simon and Garfunkel are like kind of like folk industry plants. And I can kind of see it.
Folk industry plants.
Yeah.
Cause go on.
If you listen to their like first stuff, like they have a couple singles that they released under their old name, and they were more like doo-wop, like rock type stuff.
Yes.
And then like when folk started popping off, then they like switched to folk. And I'm glad they did, you know. But
yeah.
But they did like switch to folk at that time. So, from rock.
The times they are changing. Yeah. You know where they were in New York, that there was a scene happening, so I could see. I wouldn't say it's like an industry plant. An industry plant is like a guy in a suit is like, I'm gonna make you a star, and then
Yeah.
you know, make an album written by other people entirely. But I mean, this album, the first one especially, is like a folk album, you know, with folk like traditional and covers, which is very like that's what people did during, you know, that day.
Right.
Because this is right after when they were like making this, when rock really started the British invasion, the Beatles and stuff. So you know, doing covers and stuff like that was hip. But yeah, but I don't know about industry plant. I've never really heard anything about like that with them. As far as switching styles with the times, that's one thing.
When they got signed to their label, they did kind of switch styles with the times for sure.
Oh, they're
because that's when this like album came out. But
yeah,
at the same time, like some of it's like being signed to a major label. They kind of start to influence like you on like what's hot and stuff. And then on the other side, it's more just like you're surrounded by this type of music. You're surrounded by these people, by Bob Dylan and stuff. And then you kind of just start to become influenced by it. But
yeah,
the one thing about Simon and Garfunkel that I really like is that they kind of take it into another level and maybe it's even better that they didn't come from those folk backgrounds, that they come from New York, because they're able to bring in a lot of other styles of music into what would be a folk album, but it ends up just sounding like something completely different and like really nice.
Yeah, they definitely get into some really like classic. That's too vague of a word, but they reach these heights on this album, which it's more of just.
Did we even mention what album we're talking about?
I think I said early. And then we talked about the first album that they were making right after the British invasion started. I think I said that.
Yeah. Oh, sorry to completely cut you off there, but it's Wednesday morning, 3 a.m.
Yeah. The first Simon and Garfunkel. I totally lost what I was saying.
Fuck me.
No, it's all good. something New York. Basically my point was that, yeah, you know, this is a folk album, but it's kind of became bigger than folk. It is bigger than folk.
Yeah.
You know, when you have songs like The Sound of Silence or Wednesday Morning, 3 a.m.
Definitely.
Or, you know, Bleecker Street. If you're like comparing like folk songs or the biggest or best folk songs, those are among them. And the Sound
Yeah.
of Silence, that's just like an insanely, it's just in like the culture of like music,
Right.
people
Like it's
people
probably
just
in
know
like
that
the
shit.
top 20 recordings of like all time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing, with industry plants, it's because usually I just think of them like, someone like a Miley Cyrus's sister or whatever.
Mhm.
There's like, yeah, okay, we'll make albums like with you too and stuff, and they like put them on like Good Morning America and shit like that. Even though it's not like a genuine like uprising sort of a
Mhm.
thing.
Mm.
But I mean, I could also see that because the way this band's promoted is weird, and the
Yeah.
flow of everything.
Yeah, I see what you're saying though. Like an industry plant is more like something created by the label, put into what's hot, and then kind of injected into it to try to make money. But for them, I would say it was more of a pivot. It was more of like a finger in the wind type of pivot, but then it ended up working out for them really well.
Yeah, I don't know how they met or whatever. I think the biggest difference would be is
I
if
saw
like,
it.
oh, was it
Yeah.
like a label putting them together? Like,
No, actually, they grew up like 3 blocks from each other, and they went to elementary school together.
that's so fucking weird. What the
Yeah,
hell?
they were like they. Okay, so what I read was that one of them, like they grew up together knowing each other, and then one of them sang in the like third grade or fifth grade talent show, and then the other one was like, oh, like I want to join you because it seems like a really good way to like pick up on girls. And so they started harmonizing, and they were really influenced by like those like barbershop quartets and stuff. So they started to learn how to harmonize, and then yeah, just like went from there.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Somebody you went to school with growing up.
Totally. Like, what are the chances type shit.
Yeah, I rarely hear about anything like that. I guess the Beatles were pretty young when they knew each other and started playing.
Right.
They're like 13 or whatever. But yeah, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. This is it's a pretty classic like album by now, but what do you think about it?
What I think about it, I think to preface it, I have less of a frame of reference of you than you. I mean, I like some of their songs and stuff, but I've never really dived that deep into them. I honestly really, really liked it. I think it's a great, I mean, the whole thing is like, I would say the first word that pops out to me is listenable. It's extremely, extremely listenable. Every single track. So
Yeah, it's nice, like easygoing music for the most part.
Yeah, it's kind of just like impossible to hate it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I like that about them. I don't want to just say like
sounds nice.
Yeah, exactly. Like their voices sound nice together. Instruments like acoustic guitar and I mean a lot of acoustic guitar.
Yeah, and
just
hitting the right frequencies. I don't know.
That was like a type of like mood and sound that I first started to really appreciate after hearing Rubber Soul the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the like songs on this album really like as far as like that general vibe itch, it really like scratched that itch. Just like they write totally different songs than the Beatles kind of a thing, but just like how good it sounds where you have like good harmonizations with like good songs and acoustic. You don't need much.
Yeah, and not to mention the lyricism is probably there's a lot of strong elements in it, especially the harmonization, but the lyricism is probably their strongest like asset and like talent, as a group. The way they're able to write poetry and songs and like vivid imagery is like unparalleled, pretty much. There's nothing like it today. Nobody writes lyrics like that today. to put my boomer hat on. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, yeah.
it's just so complex, and in some ways, I almost like it, almost. I don't want to say like better than Bob Dylan, but I think in some ways it's very similar to Bob Dylan, and in some ways it's an antithesis because it's very cohesive, it's very poetic, it's very smooth and like calculated, and it's just, I don't know, it's just really good.
Yeah. I mean, I love, Paul Simon and stuff.
Yeah, it seems like he writes most of the lyrics too, huh?
Oh, he's like the writer.
Damn.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
So what does Garfunkel do? Does he just like chill up there and like harmonize? He has a nice voice.
as far as I know, maybe in the later albums he writes more, and I'm sure like with any or most like bands or collaborations, like if Paul Simon's writing the song, maybe the way Art Garfunkel is singing it is like changing stuff and inspiring new things. But like later on, Bridge Over Troubled Water, there's a video of Paul Simon talking about writing that, and Art Garfunkel is the one that's singing like lead on that.
Right.
Yeah, and Paul Simon, he has a whole solo career that's like really successful as well.
That's like, yeah, it's like extremely successful too. Yeah.
Yeah, which but like I like his solo career and stuff, but he seems very industry during that period of his career. And there's like songs I pick out here and there that I like from that, but for the most part, like it feels like strange and awkward, and he seemed to become like a celebrity more so than like a songwriter.
I haven't really gone past like Graceland, but like Graceland is good. I like that album. But to me, I mean, I don't. It just seems like the more that I look into the history of the band, he definitely seems like a little bit of the one that's like more like cocky, but maybe it's like well deserved, kind of thing. But just the way that they, release Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. and then it doesn't do very well, so like he dips out to like England and like writes his own shit and like records like a lot of the shit that they already recorded but by himself. Like, I don't know, it just seems kind of like sus behavior.
Yeah, I mean, a songwriter, with an ego, songwriter, they have it.
Yeah,
especially, he's a New York artist, and him and Art Garfunkel both. I guess I've seen interviews with both of them, and they both kind of gave me like just some weird vibe. Paul Simon seems like awkward, and is like it's almost like he likes to come off like almost like shy or whatever.
Yeah. He has short man energy for sure.
I wouldn't go as far as to say that. He's definitely poked fun at it. Yeah, there's a video, I forgot who he's playing against, but it's like on SNL, and it's him against some basketball player, and like from the NBA, and the joke is like he starts like schooling him, like he beats him.
Yeah.
But it's like it's dumb.
It's red dumb.
Yeah. I've seen him in like a movie too, and I didn't really like his character, but that's something else. Yeah. And then Art Garfunkel, he was just like talking about like that thing that like rich people do when they have like money and like a lot of time, and they start thinking a lot, so then they like go to like another country, like a third world country or something, just to like look at poor people and get like a bigger, which is like fine, whatever, go see the world and like get some perspective. But I don't know, because like you could only really do that if like most people are like going to work, like they haven't been to like enough places where like, okay, I'm gonna go to a third world country now, and see something that's like see something not great.
Their whole career trajectory is odd, and I feel like if you were in that position, it would make you really like out of touch in a weird way, because like the way that they blew up was very, it just wasn't, it's not very like traditional.
Yeah.
But when I was like looking into them, like basically they released this album and it just didn't do like well, like at all. But then like 2 years later, something ridiculous, like a year or two later, like The Sound of Silence started blowing up, and then they rushed like another album, and so it almost felt like accidental, and I feel like it almost felt like they fell into it because like at the time too, like Garfunkel was like getting his master's degree in like mathematics and shit, and then
Mm-hmm.
like Simon was like off in England like doing his own thing, like trying to like do a solo career, and then all of a sudden they get, like it just starts blowing up, out of nowhere after it already failed. And I feel like that weird trajectory would probably make you feel like so vilified and like a genius, and like everything you do after that like
Yeah. Yeah.
is like really dope.
Yeah. Yeah, and they kept coming out with good stuff after too, which
Yeah,
doesn't.
they did.
And also, like, this is all based off of very short interviews from like the 70s that I've seen. I have no idea how these people. Maybe they're probably good people.
They're probably great people. Just
Yeah.
talking shit.
Yeah,
But
but
no, there is some truth in the fact that like the way that they kind of disbanded was kind of weird. And like the way that they released music was very like, it was very much like a duo that has strife, with their genius.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah,
The first album, very nice listen.
definitely.
Do you have any like particular like song that you enjoy?
Like in terms of like deep cuts,
Nah, it could be anything.
I mean, obviously The Sound of Silence is but also I want to touch upon the fact that this version of The Sound of Silence I like a lot more than the other released version.
Same.
So I guess they did this acoustic version. That's how they wrote it. And then once it started blowing up after that year or whatever I said, the record label or their manager at the time, like unbeknownst to them, like took the recording and then put session musicians under it. So they basically overdubbed tracks over the recording. So it wasn't like a recording session to do the like electric guitar and drums and stuff. It was like they just recorded over the recording already.
Yeah.
And that version to me, I don't know, it just sounds like that, So this version,
Yeah, I don't like the production. I didn't know that was the story, but
yeah,
it was just something off. And like some 60s, like I love 60s pop, but production wise that was not one of the nicer sounding stuff. But yeah, I really do. I didn't really like that song until I listened to it on this first album and just thought it's really
Right.
good and powerful. And like,
yeah, because this is the intended version for sure. But the version with the electric guitar on it and stuff, the re-release, that was the one that actually like hit number one. But yeah, so that's why this track, even though it's like the biggest track, one of the biggest tracks ever, still like stands out to me. And I would say, I mean, obviously Bleecker Street is like a really well crafted song. And it's like got that vivid imagery that like The Sound of Silence has, and this like lyrical composition that makes them so amazing. He Was My Brother too. I don't know if you like that song. That song's pretty good.
Yeah, I like that one.
That one kind of reminds me of that one's kind of Dylan-esque in some ways to me.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really think about it in that sense. That's like the harmonies a lot.
Yeah.
And there's something almost like gospel-y, or like I don't know if it comes from folk, like on a lot of these songs. I know that first one is like a cover, but I don't know if it's the chords or whatever.
So I completely agree with you, and I was
almost
trying
like
to think of
Catholic
that.
church, like
Yes.
like yeah, it gave me some peace be with you vibes, you know.
No, for sure. So like, one of the first songs is Benedictus, and
Yeah.
I actually really like that song. But they're speaking in like like Latin or some shit.
It's a dead
And
language.
yeah, totally. And so obviously it has like this kind of like Catholicism vibe to it. So I looked it up, and it was like it's like from the 1500s. And I feel like a lot of the chord changes that's on that song, they use kind of in their own songs, and I would describe it as like chamber music. That's the
Oh,
right
is that
word for
is that
it.
what chamber music is? I've
I
always
think
heard
so.
chamber music, and I never understood.
Yeah, I think chamber music's like this sort of, if I'm not mistaken, like this sort of Catholic type of like, ooh.
Yeah, like not resolving, like
Yeah,
it's
kind of
like
spiritual type
that
stuff.
music's. So, do you think are all the songs they sing in church like that old? It must be because it's like weird. I can't imagine anyone writing that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Well, it depends what kind of church you go to. I mean, if you go to like the Christian church, like they have like rock songs and stuff, and like
No, I'm
Hillsong
talking about
United.
the real stuff.
The real stuff. What
Yeah.
real men pray to. No, I'm just kidding. But
Which is like, because like Paul Simon's a Jew. I don't know what Art Garfunkel is.
yeah, I feel like I don't know.
I think he's
Garfunkel
Jewish.
sounds pretty Jewish. Yeah, but they apparently the place that they grew up in, Queens, was like a very Jewish neighborhood. So yeah, I think they're Jewish, but I don't know. Maybe they were just really influenced by that type of music, and yeah, like most.
There's
of
a lot
that
of Italians in
Catholic-
New York too, so
for sure.
probably had friends and stuff.
And in some ways, maybe having that unbiased opinion of it might even make you like it more. You know what I'm saying? Like, because for me, it's like I grew up, going to Catholic church. And so when I hear that type of stuff, like in the Catholic church, it doesn't really hit me in any sort of way because I like grew up on it and like, don't really have that kind of connection to it. But maybe like coming from an outside perspective, like, oh, this music's actually like good, like on its face, was like that helped them. I don't know, maybe speculation, but
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. It's different and very noticeable, and there's like a lot of imagery associated with, Catholicism and Catholic churches.
yeah.
Was like-
And it keep going.
I was gonna say just like the massive church and like the massive organs and whatnot.
Right, yeah, there's this very spiritual element to it. And yeah, it is like this Europe, it's from Europe in the Renaissance period, like late Renaissance period. At least this song is. So, but the thing is, it definitely permeates through the whole album. You can really hear it. You can really hear like a lot of the different places where it's like the sun is burning, stuff like that. You can really hear kind of that vibe.
Yeah, Go Tell It on the Mountain sounds just like a Christian. That's like the rock and roll like Christian churches you're talking about.
Yeah,
That's the one that sounds like not Catholic at all.
That one's probably a cover as well. Yeah, but I didn't look, but
Yeah.
and then they do the times they're changing. I like the Dylan version better. But like obviously this is still really cool. Kind of an ode. The thing that I like about these early types of albums, like when we talked about the Beatles and stuff too, they kind of sneak in like covers, and it gives you a really good clue into where their headspace was at the time, and to what they were using to write their own songs. And
Okay.
so, with that chamber music and with Bob Dylan, that's basically the mixture you're getting.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And then maybe like even with the attitude of rock and roll, especially like on that first song, because like obviously rock and roll was big in the 50s, but it's been taken to a new level. The recording it March of 1964, the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan in February of 64.
Right.
So that shit's fucking
All happening at the same time.
Yeah, dude. Writing your album and recording your album while the Beatles have been around for like a month.
Yeah. Just popping off.
Yeah. Oh, shit. It's a fucking fly in here.
Another thing I wanted to talk about is like, did you hear their early recordings, like the recordings that they did before this?
No, not at all.
So they only dropped like fucking like 2 songs, and they're like completely doo-wop songs under the name Tom and Jerry. And like, to see this pivot is like really interesting to me, because like I was kind of thinking about how a lot of bands probably struggled from the 50s to the 60s. Like, think about the music of the 50s and then think about the music of the 60s, and like how many bands probably didn't survive that shit because they sounded old. Like, once the Rolling Stones came out, once the Beatles came out, once Bob Dylan came out, like, you either had to adapt, or keep playing that like 50s music and like become irrelevant. And I feel like Simon and Garfunkel, they were almost part of the change in a lot of ways, but is also part of it's like an adaptation or an evolution, of music that they were able to fare really well with.
Yeah, a lot of it could just be timing and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to listen to that earlier stuff, but I think I've seen a video that's at like Abbey Road in like 1964, and because the Beatles popped, so there's already like labels trying to put other Beatles like bands together, and like it's like a group of 5 guys with Beatles haircuts, and kind of like they like wrote a song, or like they're mainly playing in a style and singing in a style of like I Want to Hold Your Hand or something. So like how labels were going with all the 50s stuff and what Simon and Garfunkel were going for in the 50s, with that change in the 60s, same thing was happening. So whether like those guys from the 50s just like change to sound like the Beatles, or keep doing their old style and give up or whatever, like I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah,
that sucks.
It was just such a weird shift, like that. It was a big enough shift to where everybody at the time had to think about what the fuck they were doing, Yeah. Or maybe they just got inspired, Yeah. Yeah,
but so with like this first album, the first Paul Simon album, Paul Simon Songbook, and then The Sounds of Silence. I also don't like that the album is like, I guess that was a thing. That was before albums were like a thing. It was more just like a collection of songs on a record. But I also don't like how that's the name of the album, The Sounds of Silence. Yeah, it seems very much industry planted, if I may say so myself. Well, marketing. It's like, yeah, it's not like it doesn't seem like genuine art. It's not. Yeah. Yeah. But I think they were trying to capitalize on that wave of Sound of Silence, and it's very much cherry pie. We're gonna call the album Cherry Pie. Yeah. You're the cherry pie guy. Yeah. Yeah. But basically it's the same exact shit, but like I don't know. They'll just do it just to capitalize on whatever like made the money type shit. Yeah. So though I wouldn't mind be called the year. Wow, that was a very stupid way of saying it. I would rather be called the Sound of Silence guy than the Cherry Pie guy. Yeah, one's like an amazing song and the other is some stupid 80s bullshit. Yeah. That's like, I can't imagine that shit getting back in style in any time. I can't imagine Disturbed covering that song and it being, I guess, a fan favorite of Disturbed. I can't believe that that's like their biggest song is covering The Sound of Silence. Like 15 years after they were like famous in the zeitgeist. Like, yeah.
It was so interesting.
All right, I'm gonna kill this fucking fly. Hold up.
Karate Kid, Simon and Garfunkel. They're pretty good. They write songs that no one else would. And they might just be smoking weed. Cool. So, do you want to explain the chronology of their releases? Like,
the ones that we're kind of talking about?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
You sent me like Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., then Sound of Silence, and then Paul Simon's Songbook, and they're all kind of at the same time, so I'm like confused.
Okay. Explain it to me. Well, we were talking about the first album, and then when I said it kind of in chronological order, Paul Simon's Songbook, and then Sounds of Silence, and stupid name. Yeah, but basically them as a duo, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., was released in 1964, and I guess it just did not do well. It didn't do well, as a release. So, and the British invasion, happened, so Paul Simon, I guess, tried to get in on that and moved to the UK and made his own solo album, which had a lot of the song, or some had songs from the first album, and then songs that was going to be on the Sounds of Silence album that came out 2 years later in 1966. So first one, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m., Simon and Garfunkel. He goes solo in the UK, comes back to America, and then with Garfunkel. And but yeah, Sounds of Silence, it just seems more like label pushed and like developed. Although I love a lot of the songs on it. The ones that are on his solo album that make it onto that, I like a lot. But just like really the Sounds of Silence is the one I don't like, and I like the version of Leaves that are green on his solo album more.
Okay, yeah, I also like that song. That song was sick.
And that one, as far as like,
did they re-release it on that Sounds of Silence album?
Yeah, track 2, I think, or the first one. And it's like there's like this weird organ type thing on it, which I don't love. I like the solo one more. But that's like just such amazing songwriting.
Yeah, definitely.
Just
and the
like
fact that he wrote that in his like early 20s is like fucking insane.
Yeah. It's to be like that mature as a songwriter. But then even like the opening lines, it's so like it's like right there, but I can never write anything that like genius for a song. Like I was 21 years old when I wrote this song. I'm 22 now, but I won't be for long. And then, getting older with the leaves that are green turn to brown. It's like, it's fucking right there.
You're like woman leaving you because like, what was green is like brown. It's like, it's very, very, really good lyrics. Yeah. It's like
should be like songwriting 101. If there's a songwriting hall of fame, that should it should be in there.
I agree. That song stuck out to me as like really, amazing lyricism. But okay, that kind of clears it up. Because it's very like a little bit disjointed, but like so is a lot of stuff from that era, and even like a little earlier, like some of the early Elvis stuff too. It's like you don't really know, like, and some of the early Beatles stuff, you don't really know like when's coming out when, because record labels were like moguls. They were moguls back then. They ruled the fucking airwaves and kind of just like released shit that they thought was doing well. It's also interesting at that time because there was no internet, so like how did they know what was doing well? But I don't know, they just figured it out or guessed. And cocaine. That's
what's like interesting about Beatles stuff is like there's no like official number of like how many were sold.
Yeah.
So it's like in the hundreds of millions, and like even like a bit like they sold 1 billion records, but the papers, I guess.
Yeah, for reals.
Yeah, but so what'd you think of the solo album?
I honestly I liked it. But it's kind of how I feel with like a lot of solo albums where, okay, first of all, to me, it highlighted how much Paul Simon actually did for Simon and Garfunkel, because I always thought it was kind of like a 50-50 thing, but now I'm kind of realizing after listening to that, it's more of like a 75-25 type of thing. So there's that. And also, his guitar playing is amazing. But at the same time, that 75-25 split, like that's what makes 100 type shit of like, it's just missing that like oomph, that he has with like Simon and Garfunkel. It's a good album.
I know
sure,
what you mean.
But
Definitely.
it sounds like a solo album from a guy that's in a duo.
Yeah, it's kind of not as full. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you need both of it for the like complete picture.
You do, and like also it, obviously there's fucking amazing shit on it, but it's like type of it's like the echo chamber type thing, where it's like sometimes you need that second opinion, sometimes you need that second person to kind of drive it in that direction that maybe you didn't think of, and it's like the Police with like Sting, Sting. He needs somebody to drive it into this different direction to make it interesting. So that's kind of how I felt about that one. But like, what about you?
Pretty similar. I would say like Paul Simon, if we're talking, I agree with like what you said with Sting and the Police, but I like Paul Simon more than I like Sting.
Yeah, for sure. Same.
But I like the Police more, I think, than I like Simon and Garfunkel. I guess song for song sort of a thing.
Yeah. And just the style of music that I'm into type thing. Like
you're a drummer.
Preference. Like like that's a big part of it. Yeah, for sure. But it's just like I like the way the Police sound more.
Yeah, great band, great records. We'll probably do an episode on them sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, the solo record, it almost sounds just like a songwriter album. It is. That's exactly what it is. But it feels like that, and I don't know if it should feel like that.
Right. It should just be a collection of great songs, but it sounds like, and in some ways it is. But yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and then Sounds of Silence. I do not like the version of that song on there.
It needs the harmonies. The harmonies are what makes that song. The harmonies are like exactly what makes that song.
Oh yeah, it feels very different on the solo one. He's like tapping his foot and stuff. It's like making it more like empowering almost, which I don't like.
Yeah, it's more cooler when it's in this like eerie, somber place.
Yeah, or covered by Disturbed.
Ooh.
But yeah, on the Sounds of Silence album, the label release, I really don't like. That's my least favorite version of the song with the overdubs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, the rest of it's pretty great, I think.
Wait, is there any tracks that you think like are sick that maybe aren't like talked about that much?
I don't know what are like all the fan favorites of Simon and Garfunkel, but I really love April Come She Will and Kathy's song. Those ones are on the solo one as well, but I really like the versions on the Simon and Garfunkel album. Yeah. Yeah, Richard Corey. It's all just like they're just really fucking good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it goes back to that thing where like this music is just very listenable music. It's just very good. And like we can describe it like how we are, but like you just really have to like listen to it to like understand. I don't know if anybody could ever do it like them again, because it's like almost this certain like I don't give a fuckness, you know? I don't really even know how to explain it. It's just like they almost like didn't really give a fuck of what was popular other than the fact that they wanted to do folk. But like in terms of all their other influences, they never went for like what's hard, what's doing well at the time, like what's dope. Like they just went for like whatever they liked, you know? And it just kind of makes it into this really unique like thing.
Yeah, like if they got switched, obviously with like the changing of the times and Suits pushing them to do folk, they definitely got into like a whole different like sound from that.
Mm-hmm.
That is them. That like wasn't there before them. Even it's not on like any of these albums we're talking about, but do you know this song Scarborough Fair?
Yes.
Yeah. It's just like
same
that.
vibe. Yeah.
It's so big. Like
right.
And it's
eerie.
not you don't think of like folk at all really. It's like heavy.
It's eerie, it's heavy, it's folky, but it's also it also goes back to that chamber influence that I was kind of saying, where it's like
yeah, definitely.
It's almost like Catholic in a weird way.
That shit is so fucking Catholic.
This shit's Catholic as hell, dude. Basically.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, but okay, well, hard transition, but
trans.
Did you kind of want to talk about how this like I don't know, like what you mentioned to me Inside Llewyn Davis the movie, and I kind of wanted to know like how you think that connects like to this era or like to this like to Simon and Garfunkel.
The New York folk scene?
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact dates of like that movie are, but at the end of the movie he sees Bob Dylan and he's like a folk artist and stuff, but then Bob Dylan's about to change the world. He's gonna like be Bob Dylan,
right?
So the rest of the movie, with him and also like he was in a duo, right, that had like a little success, and then his partner killed himself or whatever.
Actually,
so that must have been like a similar time and theme with like Simon and Garfunkel trying to get on like records, like rock and roll to folk stuff.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but he's in this campy. Okay, so first of all, Inside Llewyn Davis. If you guys haven't seen it, it's a Coen Brothers movie. It's one of their more underrated. It's an extremely underrated movie. It's one of their most underrated movies. But it stars fucking
Oscar the dude
Isaac.
from Star Wars. Yeah,
Oscar Isaac, and he's basically a folk singer like in this time. That kind of Simon Garfunkel, Bob Dylan were blowing up in New York City. This folk revival scene. So yes, in the beginning of the movie, I forgot about that. He starts out in this really campy, fucking cliche type, rock band with Adam Driver, and I forgot who the other person was. It was a trio. And then basically like it gets dark, like one of them fucking like kills himself or something, and then or dies, and then he kind of goes into this like just like acoustic like solo direction, right? Where it's like a starving artist type thing.
Yeah, I think he has like friends and stuff in the whatever like Greenwich Village like folks worlds, and he's performing. I think he's like performing with them, but I think it's like a past thing that he was in a group where his like partner killed himself.
Right. It's like a flashback or some shit. Yeah. But
that's
that's
like,
basically
cool
how
family.
Yeah.
But it's showing like the grind of
right.
like, the folk scene of that time.
It kind of is a really good like point in the movie because if you think about it, like that's how a lot of these guys and girls like actually started, right? A lot of these people in the folk revival scene, many of them, and like kind of how you were mentioning, like it's ironic how it came from New York. Like it is in a lot of ways, but a lot of ways it was like people. It seems like it was people from that were playing 50s music that got really tired of it and wanted to do something different, so they all like pivoted. And it was kind of like a hard pivot in the movie, and then it's also like a hard pivot like in real life with a lot of these guys, you know.
Yeah, and also just like the change in the world that was happening, and especially America at that time, and people becoming sort of more socially aware, and
Yeah.
you know, with the rise and you know, JFK was already dead by this point.
Yeah, but people kind of turning, you know, you got the war, the Vietnam War happening, and acid.
Everything's cooking up.
Yeah, it's just going crazy. Nixon.
And then when you have like the, you know, the biggest like folk artists, like a legend like Woody Guthrie, very social artist. I'm sure that was just like a big influence on the scene. I don't know where Woody Guthrie is from at all.
I feel like he's probably from like fucking like Oklahoma or some shit. I think he was the real deal.
Yeah, just singing about. I mean, yeah, the shit he's saying about
The Dust Bowl.
the Dust Bowl. Yeah, a fucking album on the Dust Bowl. That shit's amazing. Actually, it's a great.
Yeah, we should do a podcast on that one for sure.
Yeah, I agree. If you've never listened to that album, I highly recommend. But yeah, so. It's interesting how that became a fad, folk music in the 60s. Because, like, it's so, like, roots and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very, like, forward-thinking time, and, like, we're going to the fucking moon, you know?
Right, it's almost ironic. It is ironic in a lot of ways. The fact that it came from fucking rock and roll people in New York, which is ironic as hell. But just the fact that, you know, it's this kind of return to basics type thing when technology is advancing, thought is advancing. Like, it's very, and then
The
all of a sudden,
thoughts are advancing.
Yes.
I repeat, the thoughts are advancing.
The woke thoughts are advancing. And, as they always do. And, like, basically, you know, like, fuck it. We're gonna dress like we're from Texas, and we're gonna fucking sing old, I don't know, mountain town songs, whatever they call them. What do they call those songs that like circulated throughout the? We'll have to talk more about folk at some point, but there was basically these, like, this family from like the early, I think like almost 1800s, in the like West Virginia, like Blue Ridge Mountains, and a lot of their original work was what circulates as a lot of these covers.
Oh, I didn't know it came from like that small of a group of like people or that small of a community. Yeah, I never knew like where these like traditional songs. I just saw, you know, I had no idea where they came from.
Yeah,
or how you learn them.
I don't know where the fuck I saw this. I think it was either on a documentary about folk in itself, or it might have been a documentary about early Bob Dylan, but I think it was about folk as a whole. And basically, the early folk songs, they came from the South and from like West Virginia, like deep in the mountains, like what probably a lot of people would call Hicks, you know, but really early on, like in the early 1910s and like the 1800s. And most of these songs were passed on much like gospel songs, and actually a lot of them were takes on gospel songs as well. They kind of, gospel and folk kind of like started to like metal, like mix in this weird way, but they didn't have recordings at the time, so they would basically pass them on by ear. And so they would slightly change over time and like over region, and then also like sometimes people write them down. So that's why a lot of these songs that you see that like what Simon Garfunkel might cover, the Beatles might cover, Bob Dylan, Rolling Stones, they cover these songs, and then they even cover like different versions of these songs because like they were like standards, you know, at the time that are just being like passed through, kind of like stories.
That's a fucking what? Sorry to come in so hot on that.
What the fuck?
What the
Fuck did you just say?
It's just a wild way to sort of take in a song and learn a song. You have to be taught it directly.
Definitely.
And we grew up in the generation where you could just Google it constantly.
Right. But also those people were bored as shit all the time, so this is basically what they did. But yeah, I forgot why I mentioned that. But yeah, like a lot of these people were influenced by that type of stuff, and maybe they had this sort of like attraction to it, especially at that time when everything seemed so crazy.
It would have been really fucking crazy to I just don't want to say crazy, but $30 pays your rent on Bleecker Street. How much do you think your rent costs on Bleecker Street now?
Dude, times fucking 100. Like literally 3,000.
Yeah.
And that's like a deal.
Yeah, I was about to say probably more. Probably the 4,000's the new 3,000.
Yeah, because Bleecker Street is like, I mean, it's a long street, but when I last time I was in New York, I believe most of it's in Soho, because that's where we were staying, by NYU, and it's very much changed from, the time that they describe on Bleecker Street. I don't even want to say it's gentrified, because it was always like, there was never really like a strong like culture there to my knowledge, but it's more just like the rich people, hipsters came in, and it has no resemblance to folk or to this era, which is interesting about New York, because New York is always changing, right? Like when you go to Nashville, and it's not a diss on Nashville at all, right? It's just different. It's like when you go to Nashville, they're very much about like heritage. They're very much about preserving the culture of like the country music that was there at the time. But when you go to Bleecker Street, it's just fucking paved over, or you go to San Francisco, it's just paved over.
Fuck that shit.
Yeah, you have a house.
San Francisco, it's paved over with shit.
Yeah, it's literally paved over with, worse than shit. But like, they have a Grateful Dead house and they have a Janis Joplin house, and that's it now. But they don't really have like a strong collection,
a full house
or an identity. Yeah, they don't really have like an identity like surrounding this type of music, or like the type of vibe that like the folk revival in New York or like Bleecker Street, gives off. And that's something that really like kind of, I don't know, it kind of makes me sad, kind of disappoints me that those times weren't more like well preserved, like, and that they're not like respected enough like in this culture. But
yeah, I guess people want money, and if that's hot real estate,
right, fucking Bleecker Street, like everybody wants to live on that.
Yeah, I mean, folk is very historical and important to me, I guess, but yeah, but also it's like New York is always moving. There's always like new shit. I can't really think of much that they would really try to preserve there.
Yeah, and honestly, it's probably for the better, to be honest, It's like kind of like not a diss on Nashville, but Nashville's more about that preservation type stuff. But New York's always evolving, just because there's so many other things other than music going on at the same time, which in a lot of ways makes it more cool, but in some ways it kind of sucks. Same with SF, kind of like sucks because they don't really have like a good like grasp on the music that was so influential, at the time. But yeah, you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to touch upon?
It's just really good music. You wonder sometimes about like new music, and I'm not hearing stuff I'm liking, but there are tons of songs that are decades old that you could dive into. So do that, you'll come across some gems that are like, some of these songs because I wasn't alive then, so it was definitely a point where I knew Simon and Garfunkel and I guess a couple of their big songs, but I really enjoyed what I was listening to, like going back through their discography, and especially this early stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think that this music, I wish it would be made today, but just that special time and place, it captured a really nice moment, and it's amazing that we can still go back and listen to it, and it's just really fucking nice. I mean, it's the same thing. This is just really nice music, no matter what age you are, no matter what place in life you are, no matter what time, everything. Your creed, yeah. But
if you like Creed,
yeah, you fucking listen to this shit, that all dissolves away. You go ego death.
Anything else you want to throw in?
No.
Paul Simon's going to be going on tours, or no, he's coming out with an album soon. So
probably gonna suck.
Well, yeah, probably going to suck. All right. Peace be with you.
Bye.